Hi there, my name's Tim Irwin. I'm back here in the back of the Moser Engineering Shop in the R&D department, and we're going to show you how to install a thru package in 4 parts. The 4 parts being the AntiRoll first, shock second, then the relocation kit, housing, and lower control arms last. According to the instructions, they start with the car on the ground, all 4 wheels, and explain about how to jack the car up on jack stands and or use a lift like we're going to do. This car here, we've already disassembled it just for video purposes. The first thing we're going to do with this car is drill the holes for the AntiRoll bar. There's 4 holes that need to be drilled in the floorboards, and we use a fixture to do that. As I said before, we include a fixture in this kit to drill the 4 holes in the floorboard to locate the AntiRoll bar kit. We use a vice grip C-clamp type clamp. You'll need 2 of these to do this procedure to hold the AntiRoll in place. But it's as simple as putting the bracket up in the corner of the car, right where the front cross member is, and clamping it on. Then you use a 25/64 drill bit to drill the 2 holes in the fixture. Do that on both sides of the car. On some Mustangs, there's a little stud that you'll have to cut out of the way to complete this procedure. Okay, now it's time to install the AntiRoll bar assembly. You'll have the AntiRoll bar itself. You have the oil light bushings, there'll be 2 of those, and 2 of the outboard brackets, left and right handed. The one I have in my hand is the left side of the car, or the driver's side of the car. Take the bushings, slip them into the bracket, smear a little grease on them, and then slide them on the end of the AntiRoll bar. Then you'll need your 2 vice grip style C-clamps to put it up into the car. It's as simple as this. Install the AntiRoll bar by putting the 2 bolts on each side into the corresponding holes into the floorboards. Once they're slid into the place, hold the bar up and put your clamp on each side of the car. At this point, I'm going to lower the car down and put the nuts and the stiffener plates on the top of the AntiRoll bar assembly. Now that we've got the car dropped down, you can see where the bolts come through the floorboard. As I said before in the beginning of this video, we've got this car all stripped out. So when you're doing this, make sure you get the carpeting and everything out of the way so you're not drilling holes through the carpet. Then once it's down like this, you can put the stiffener plate on top, 2 washers on that, and then the nylock nuts go on the studs. Do that on both sides. Now that we've got the car lowered to the ground, I'm going to go ahead and put the shocks and the upper shock mounts in the car. The upper shock mounts bolt on the top of the shock as shown, and you can tell that they're offset. That offset goes towards the rear of the car. It's basically as simple as slipping the shock mount up through the original shock mounting hole in the car, putting the adapter plate on and the nut. Then you just tighten the nut and the bolt. The next thing we'll install, now that everything's back up in the air, is the AntiRoll Links. To put the links together, you measure the time joint to the nut, and it measures 3/4 of an inch. You do that with all 4 heim joints. There'll be 2 left-handed and 2 right-handed joints. Once you get that done, put never seize on the threads, and then thread them into the corresponding end of the AntiRoll link. Once it's threaded in, take your 7/16 bolt and nut, slide it in through the arm on the AntiRoll bar. From the outside to the inside, put the nut on. I'll show you how to attach the bottom once we get the rear end up inside the car. We've got the car back up in the air now and the rear end positioned up inside of the car for video's sake. When you're doing this in your driveway on jack stands or whatever, make sure you got a buddy to help you do this. This thing is really heavy and can be cumbersome when you're putting this thing together. I've already installed the upper control arms for the video's sake, but when you're putting these in the car, the recommended spacers that go in the heim joint go in the right-handed end of the heim joint. We put the left-handed heim towards the front of the vehicle. They're a 5/8 to 1/2 inch spacer that goes in the back, and then in the front we use our aluminum cone spacers to go into the body. When you're assembling the upper control arm and the lower control arms, when you're putting the 5/8 by 3/4 heims in, measure from the nut to the end of the heim, make that dimension 7/8 of an inch, lubricate them with Never Seez, and thread everything together before pre-assembly. This rear end will come with the brackets installed, our relocation bracket, and the tube stiffeners. We put these brackets on this TruFox package so that we can readjust instant center on the upper 4-link bars, give you some more tunability with this package. We've designed our upper adjustable mounts on this TruFox package. A lot of guys had called in and wanted to know if their relocation kits would fit on our housing. Our 88 housing is a lot heavier duty than a stocker, so we've designed our own upper relocation kit. With this package, we also have the adjustable lowers so you can change your instant center position on the housing, and that also includes the rear adjustable shock mount for the coilover shocks. The upper cone spacers slide into the forward heim joint just like this. At this point, we'll lower the car down so that we can install the front part of the upper control arm into the body. We typically do that. It just makes it a little bit easier for the install to put the upper control arms in first and then put the lowers in. I've installed my upper control arm bolts. The rear end's roughly located in the car. The next thing I'm going to do is put the lower control arm together by putting the heims in the cone spacers. This control arm sets approximately 18 3/4 center to center, just like the original Fox body control arm. Try to get them as close to each other as possible. Then I'll stick it in the car. Once you have your control arm set center to center length, then install the front part of the control arm into the hole. Slide the bolt in there. Then raise the back end up of the control arm, slide the bolt in there. Typically start midpoint or closer to the housing on your adjustments. Once you get your lower control arms in, the bolts and nuts on and everything, the next thing you want to do is hook up your AntiRoll links. Basically, you just stick the bolt through the hole on the tabs on the housing. Do the same thing on the other side. You may have to lengthen or shorten your links to get the bolt holes to line up. Then your shock mount is bolted to the back of the lower control arm mount. We start out in the midpoint adjustment. Once you get that bolted on with your 3/8 hardware, just stick your 1/2 inch bolt in the hole and you should be good to go. At that point, it's basically nut and bolt everything. Make sure the rear end housing is square in the car, even on each side, and you should be ready to run. In closing, I'd like to talk a little bit about setting the rear end parallel in the car so you know it goes down the track straight. Typically, on most factory cars, you can measure from the bottom of the B pillar, which is the bottom corner of the door opening in the car. Those are pretty precise from the factory. What we do, take a tape measure, hold on the B pillar, and measure to the center of the housing and make that number equal on both sides with the lower control arms. Then adjust your pinion angle and make sure that the tires are even in the wheel wells when you're done. You should be good to go. If you have any questions, call us at Moser Engineering. We'll be glad to talk you through them.